Hello ladies and gents, it's Jake here, and today I wanted to talk to you about the newly announced animated Batman film that will be adapting the popular story known as Knightfall. And actually I should say animated Batman films in the plural, because this adaptation will actually be broken up across 4 separate animated films, which is something that's never really been done before. We've had two-parters before. We've had The Dark Knight Returns Part 1 and 2, as well as Batman The Long Halloween Part 1 and 2, but we've never really gone higher than that. Of course, last year we had the Crisis on Infinite Earths animated trilogy that was broken up into 3 parts, but for one character, we've never really had an animated series of films surpass 2. So this is going to be something that's a lot different, and it's actually going to even surpass the entire Knightfall arc in the comics, if you will, because that was broken up into 3 different stories. You had Knightfall, Knight's Quest, and Knight's End, which was 3, and this is going to add a 4th section into it, and it could be taking a bit from both or doing its own thing and maybe taking some creative liberties. We're not sure yet. But I want to dive into this and see maybe what we can expect from this film. You know, we really don't know a lot right now, but this is just going to be talking about things that could happen, things that I would like to see that other adaptations of Knightfall have kind of missed out on in the past. So, you know, with this being a animated film that is not set in the Tomorrowverse era, I'm hoping that we can avoid the annoyingly persistent sound quality issues that we had in several of the Tomorrowverse films, where there were just awkward pauses in between the dialogue, where there was no background music, no other sounds happening at all. It really made the viewing experience for a number of those films jarring, especially in films like Green Lantern Beware My Power, as well as Justice Society World War II. Now, the 2 animated Batman films that we got, which were the Long Halloween Part 1 and 2, it was pretty minimal in those films. It definitely didn't not happen, but it was a lot less prominent in those Batman films as opposed to some of the other ones within the Tomorrowverse. So I'm hoping we're past that and that there won't be any awkward pauses of absolutely zero sound in between bits of dialogue. So that's something I wanted to get out of the way first. I really hope we are past that point now that the Tomorrowverse has come and gone. Now, when we look at other adaptations of Knightfall, Knightfall has never really been fully adapted to the screen, regardless of whether you're talking about animation or live action. The closest that we've gotten would probably be The Dark Knight Rises, but that also wasn't a full adaptation of Knightfall. Not only were there parts of Knightfall, significant parts that it left out, but it also combined bits of No Man's Land in there as well, and did kind of a Cliff Notes version of both of those stories. And you know, the biggest significant part that Knightfall left out, or The Dark Knight Rises rather, left out of Knightfall, was that of Jean-Paul Valley, also known as Azrael, who was Batman's replacement after he was broken by Bane. Now, is this going to introduce Azrael as he was in the comics? Because for those of you who don't know, Azrael was brought into DC Comics a few months actually before Knightfall happened. It was in Sword of Azrael in October of '92, and then in the first half of '93 is when Batman got his back broken by Bane, and then Jean-Paul Valley became the next Batman while Bruce was in recovery. Now, Jean-Paul was kind of a crazy Batman because he was being influenced by the Order of Saint Dumas in his mind, and he made this really high-tech, advanced batsuit that had more gadgets than Batman ever carried into a fight, and he also did not care if criminals lived or died. It was all just kind of collateral damage to him, and it totally freaked out the rest of the Bat family, Gotham, Gordon. No one was connecting with this Batman's methods. And I'm hoping that we get some form of connection over the course of these films between Bruce and Jean, because, like I said, he was completely absent in The Dark Knight Rises. There was speculation that Gordon-Levitt's character was going to essentially be the Jean-Paul Valley replacement, but we saw how that ended up playing out in that movie. And that version of Batman, Jean-Paul Valley's version, does actually defeat Bane, but he goes kind of crazy in the process, and he has Bane begging on his knees for his life, essentially, which is kind of parallels what happened to Batman and Bane's first encounter in that Knightfall story. And while we're on that, what happens in that Knightfall comic is, Bane breaks everyone, every criminal, every super criminal, every thug, every mugger out of Arkham Asylum, and Batman spends the next 2 to 3 months tracking down every major criminal, every minor criminal, and putting them back behind bars. And the entire time, Bane is observing him like a hunter stalking his prey, very Craven the Hunter style. And he's just watching his methods, learning how he fights, getting all of his strategies memorized. And when Batman thinks he's done, he's put the last criminal away, it's revealed that Bane has put a tracer on the Batmobile, and then he follows Batman back to the cave. And when Batman returns to the cave, he is exhausted. He is on his last leg, essentially. He is just in no condition to fight, and that's when Bane appears, and he humiliates Batman. He embarrasses him and defeats him incredibly easily. Batman had home field advantage. It was on his own terms, but he was in no condition to fight somebody like Bane, and there was no way he was going to win that. And he essentially beats him as though he were a twig. He lifts him up into the air and bursts him over his knee, and he says, "Why kill you when I can break you?" and just leaves Batman there on the floor of the cave and walks away. And it took a good amount of time for Bruce to recover from that. Now, that was actually one of the biggest criticisms of the Dark Knight Rises film, in that they did not do a great job showing the passage of time that it took for Bruce to recover from having his back broken. And to an extent, I do agree. They made it seem as though all Batman had to do was a couple push-ups, crunches, and sit-ups, and then seemingly he was fine. But I feel like since we're having 4 animated films, we're going to get a better sense of how much time has passed between Batman getting broken and him recovering. And once Batman does recover, his biggest challenge isn't facing Bane, because the new Batman, Jean-Paul Valley, has already beaten Bane. He now has to beat Jean-Paul, which is really the biggest struggle for him there. And I don't know if they're going to mirror how it was done in Knightfall. I would actually really like it if they did, maybe taking some liberties here and there, because it was really, really well done. Bruce couldn't fight Jean-Paul with his massively teched out batsuit that had all the upgrades on it. And when I say upgrades, it had solar flares, bat missiles laced with fear toxin, claws for hands. It was ridiculous. And Bruce couldn't beat somebody with that advanced armor, so he has Jean-Paul follow him through the Batcave, but in doing so, he kind of forces Jean to, remove bits of the armor. And by the way, throughout the course of this, I'm going to jump back and forth between saying Jean and Jean. It's just going to happen, so I'm warning you now. However they end up saying it in the movie is, I guess, how I'll stick to it. Because, like I said, they haven't had that character in animated adaptations anywhere, so it's kind of been a back and forth. But he essentially forces Jean to remove bits of the armor in order to continue following him, and it's at that moment where there's a big light coming out of the cave, and Jean is just blinded, and he sees Bruce standing over him, and fully invigorated and recovered and angered by what this new Batman has done, and kind of tarnished his name. Bruce says, leave and don't come back, with Valley on his knees begging forgiveness. Now, like I said, other adaptations of Knightfall, and the biggest one that we can point to is Dark Knight Rises. They really left a lot of that out because, Batman didn't really have a replacement, which is what they thought Gordon Levitt's character was going to be, but it didn't end up being that, at least not in the way that people thought, because rather than being his replacement to fight Bane, he's teased as Batman's replacement at the very end of the film, and of course we never saw where that went. It was left very ambiguous. But, with them having an additional fourth part to their series of stories, because of course Knightfall only consisted of 3 major stories, what is that fourth part going to do? Is it going to maybe, expand on some of those stories and act as kind of a bridge between the gaps, in a sense? Because, you could have, maybe Knightfall is the entire first film and then a little bit of the second one, and then you have most of the second one and part of the third being Knight's Quest, and then maybe the back half of the third and the entire fourth are Knight's End. That's just, throwing hypothetics out there. But, I really want to see, how Gotham reacts to the defeat of Batman, how they react to the presence of a new Batman, because that's something that I really did not like about some of the DC AMU films, particularly Batman Bad Blood, where Batman gets beaten by the Heretic, and you have the 2 scenes with Damian as Robin and Dick Grayson as Batman, which I really wanted a lot more of in that movie, and you really didn't see how Gotham as a whole reacted to Batman being gone and the presence of this new Batman in Dick Grayson. So I'm really hoping we get to see, how Gotham reacts to the change in Batman in this film, or in the series of films, rather, because Gotham in and of itself is essentially a character with everything that happens in that city. It's the setting is a character in its own right, and a number of the DC AMU films really didn't show that, so I'm hoping that this film changes that around and actually makes Gotham feel like a lived-in city with its own distinct identity, if you will. And the only thing we know about the release dates for these films is that the first one of the 4 films has a 2026 release date, and that is all we know currently. An exact premiere date is likely going to be announced in the coming months. And as far as the release dates for films 2, 3, and 4, we have no idea as of right now. But yeah, that was just, my kind of general thoughts in a bubble there. Like I said, the story hasn't been directly adapted for animation or live action before, so if this would be the first time that they do it, they definitely have the best chance, because they get to tell the story over the course of 4 animated films. But what I'm hoping we don't get is, a bunch of filler that just doesn't matter, which is what we have gotten in a number of DC AMU films, which was particularly frustrating in a lot of those instances. But I'm definitely curious to see what happens with this set of films. I'd like to know what you guys think down below in the comments as well. Do you think it's a good idea that they're adapting Knightfall into animation? Do you think breaking it up over 4 films rather than the initial 3 installments that the story had in the comics is a good idea, and lets them expand on the story a little bit more? What are some things that you want to see that we didn't get in other adaptations like Dark Knight Rises? Do you want to see Azrael and the Order of Saint Dumas expanded on? What other Bat family members do you want to see pop up in this? How faithful do you think it should be to the Knightfall source material? Should it be a 1-to-1 adaptation, or should they take some liberties? I really want to hear all of your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. And if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you smash that like button, glide down to the comments, and leave your thoughts. Share this video with your Bat family and friends. Stay on to this channel if you want to hear more news about this set of animated films, the new Lego Batman game, the Wolverine game, and all of that fun stuff, I got you guys covered right here. With all that said, thank you guys for watching, and have a good day. Peace out.